My name's Ethan. I'm 28, and I own a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It's the kind of place that feels too quiet, sometimes the kind of place you work your whole life to get, but never imagined actually living in. Every night, when I walk barefoot across the polished floors and see the reflection of the lights against the glass, I think about the night 10 years ago when my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and changed my life forever. Back then, I was 17. And everything I did revolved around one thing: getting out. I'd been accepted into my dream school, one that came with a price tag that made my stomach twist whenever I thought about it. But I wasn't worried. My parents had opened a college fund for me when I was a kid, and they'd told me for years not to stress about money. That fund was supposed to be my lifeline. It was the thing that kept me motivated while I worked late nights at the gas station during my senior year, stocking shelves and mopping floors just to have some spending money for myself. Our family wasn't rich, but we weren't struggling either. My dad ran a small contracting business, and my mom worked as a nurse. We lived in a modest house with peeling paint on the porch and a yard my brother and I were always getting nagged to mow. My brother, Liam, was 3 years older than me and the golden boy of the family, captain of the football team, homecoming king, the kind of guy teachers wrote glowing letters about. He had that easy, all-American charm that made people forgive him for everything, including the fact that he never seemed to do any chores and still got away with borrowing my car without asking. The first sign that something was wrong came 2 months before graduation when Liam announced he was engaged. He'd been dating this girl, Jessica, for less than a year, but they acted like they were starring in their own romantic movie. I didn't mind her, but she had a way of filling every room with her presence, like a spotlight was always following her around. My parents were thrilled. My mom immediately started looking at wedding magazines, and my dad began talking about venues and guest lists. I was happy for him. Really, I was. Until the night my parents called me into the kitchen. They were sitting side by side at the table, the kind of serious posture they used when they were about to tell us we'd done something wrong. My stomach sank before a single word was said. "Sit down, Ethan," my dad said. His voice was calm but heavy. I sat, my palms sweating against the wooden chair. "We've been thinking about Liam's wedding," my mom started, her voice unusually soft. "It's going to be expensive. Venue, catering, dress, everything. And we've decided we're going to use the college fund to help pay for it." I just stared at her for a moment. I thought I'd misheard. "You're what?" "It's for the good of the family," my dad said firmly, as if that settled it. "Your brother deserves a proper start to his life. He's going to be the head of his own household soon. We can't send him into marriage with nothing." My mind was spinning. That fund wasn't just money. It was my future, my escape plan, the one thing that had kept me sane through high school. "That's my college fund," I said, my voice low. "You told me. You promised me that money was for school." My mom reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Sweetheart, you're smart. You'll get scholarships. And if not, you can always take out loans. This is about family. You'll understand when you're older." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to tell them they were choosing Liam over me again. But I just sat there, numb, while they kept talking about catering menus and guest counts. When I went upstairs that night, I shut my bedroom door and stared at the ceiling for hours. I could hear Liam laughing with Jessica downstairs, the sound of clinking glasses, the hum of my parents' voices. It felt like the house was celebrating while I was being gutted alive. In the weeks that followed, I tried to reason with them. I brought up my acceptance letter, showed them the tuition numbers, begged them to reconsider. Every time, I got the same answer: family comes first. The phrase began to feel like a knife, one they twisted a little deeper each time they said it. By the time graduation rolled around, the college fund was completely gone. They'd paid for the wedding venue in full, hired a photographer, even sprung for an open bar. I stood there at Liam's wedding reception, wearing the suit my mom had insisted I should be grateful they bought, and watched them beam with pride while I silently wondered how I was supposed to pay for books, let alone tuition. That night, while the party roared around me and Liam and Jessica danced under fairy lights, I slipped out early and went for a walk. My phone buzzed with a text from my dad. "Don't disappear. We're doing family photos soon." I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on the hood of my beat-up car in the empty parking lot, staring up at the stars and wondering how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. I felt small, powerless, angry not just at them, but at myself for believing for so long that they'd treat me the same way they treated Liam. That was the night I decided that if they weren't going to invest in my future, I would. The morning after Liam's wedding, I came downstairs to find my parents sitting at the kitchen table again. sipping coffee like nothing monumental had just happened. The house was littered with leftover decorations and half-empty wine bottles. My mom looked up at me with a smile that felt almost too casual. "Good morning," she said brightly. "We were just talking about how beautiful everything turned out. Don't you think it was worth it?" I didn't answer right away. The word worth echoed in my head like a bad joke. Worth the $60,000 that was supposed to be my ticket out? Worth every late night I'd spent dreaming about my first day at that college? "I'm glad Liam had a nice wedding," I said finally, my tone flat enough to make my dad lower his mug and give me a look. "You could at least sound a little happier for your brother," he said sharply. This was a big day for him. I swallowed my anger. There was no point fighting this battle. Not when the war was already lost. But things didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, the wedding talk never seemed to end. My parents would gush about the pictures, talk about Liam and Jessica's honeymoon plans, even start brainstorming for a future grandchild's nursery. I couldn't sit through a single dinner without feeling like I was suffocating. Meanwhile, I was scrambling to figure out how to afford school. I applied for every scholarship I could find, but most of them barely made a dent. I started working extra shifts at the gas station, then picked up weekend work at a diner downtown. I was exhausted all the time, falling asleep at the kitchen table while trying to fill out financial aid forms. But my parents seemed to think this was some sort of character-building exercise. "You'll thank us one day," my mom would say when I complained about how little sleep I was getting. "This is teaching you responsibility." It didn't feel like responsibility. It felt like punishment. Liam, on the other hand, seemed to be living the dream. He and Jessica moved into a nice little apartment a few blocks from downtown, fully furnished, courtesy of the wedding gifts my parents had chipped in for. My dad even helped Liam get a job at one of his buddies' companies, a cushy office position that paid well and came with benefits. One night, I came home after a double shift to find Liam and Jessica sitting on our couch, flipping through a honeymoon album. My parents were gathered around them, laughing and pointing at the photos. "Look at this one," Jessica said, holding up a picture of them clinking champagne glasses in some tropical paradise. "We were celebrating because Liam just got promoted." "That's my boy," my dad said proudly, clapping him on the back. "See, Ethan, this is what happens when you work hard and make smart choices." I froze in the doorway, sweaty and exhausted from my 12-hour shift. The smell of fryer grease clung to me, and my hands still ached from bussing tables all night. My brother barely glanced at me before returning to his photos. "Yeah," I said quietly, heading upstairs. "Smart choices." I shut my bedroom door and just stood there, my chest tight. They didn't even see me anymore. Not really. I was just background noise to their perfect family picture. It got worse when I finally told them I'd been accepted to the university, but couldn't afford the housing deposit yet. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd offer to help, at least with that. But my dad only shook his head. "We've done what we can, Ethan. You'll figure it out. You could take out a loan," my mom added helpfully, as if I hadn't already considered that. "Plenty of kids do." I nodded, though my jaw was so tight it hurt. 2 weeks later, I was living in a cramped dorm with 3 other guys, working 2 jobs just to scrape by. My parents barely called, except to tell me about Liam's milestones, a bonus at work, a new car, an anniversary trip. Every conversation with them left me feeling smaller, like I was the family disappointment they just tolerated. By sophomore year, I stopped coming home for holidays. It wasn't worth it. The forced smiles, the comments about how thin I looked, the way Liam would casually mention how much help mom and dad had been giving him with this and that. The final straw came the summer after my second year when my parents called and asked me to chip in for Liam and Jessica's down payment on a house. "We just thought it would be nice if everyone contributed," my mom said over the phone, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I stared at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, trying not to laugh. I was living on instant noodles and dollar store coffee. My bank account was in the double digits, and they were asking me to help buy my brother a house. "I can't," I said finally. "I don't have anything to give." There was a long pause. Then my dad sighed heavily. "You know, Ethan, sometimes you come across as selfish," he said. "Family is supposed to support each other." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stopped waiting for them to choose me. I stopped hoping they'd ever see me as worthy. Instead, I started planning. By the time I was 21, I had stopped expecting my parents to show up for me in any meaningful way. I worked, studied, and built my own life in the cracks they'd left behind. My grades were solid. My savings account was slowly growing. And for the first time, I started to feel like maybe I had some control over where I was headed. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon just before finals week, and I was working a closing shift at the diner. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mom. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped outside to answer. Ethan, she said, her voice oddly cheerful. I have some news. I braced myself. Liam and Jessica are having a baby, she squealed. We're so excited. You're going to be an uncle. I managed a polite, congratulations, even though my stomach was already twisting. I could hear the giddy chatter of my parents in the background, probably planning baby showers and nursery colors. That's not all, Mom continued. Her tone shifted slightly, like she was about to slip in something casual. We've decided to help them out financially while Jessica takes maternity leave. We're going to cover some of their expenses for the next year. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, that kind of thing. I leaned against the wall outside the diner, staring at the cars rushing past on the wet street. Okay, I said carefully. And why are you telling me this? Well, she said, a little hesitant now. To make it work, we've had to dip into some of your savings account. My stomach dropped. What savings account? The one we've been holding since you were a kid, she said casually, as if we were discussing something minor. We didn't tell you before because we wanted it to be a surprise when you graduated. There was about $8,000 in there. We've used most of it already, but we left you some. I could barely breathe. $8,000. $8,000 that I could have used for rent, for tuition, for the laptop I'd been limping along without for the last 2 semesters. You took my money? I said slowly. It's not like that, Mom said quickly. This is for family. Liam needs it more than you do right now. You're single. You don't have kids. You'll be fine. And we know you'll understand because you've always been the responsible one. Responsible. The word hit me like a slap. I hung up before I said something I'd regret, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. For a moment, I just stood there, rain dripping down from the awning, the neon diner sign buzzing above me. I felt sick, betrayed. When my shift ended, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly for hours, the empty streets blurring past while my mind replayed her words over and over. We know you'll understand. I didn't understand. Not anymore. The next time I saw them was a month later at a family dinner they insisted I attend. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, wine poured. Liam and Jessica were there, Jessica's baby bump on full display. We're naming him after Dad, Liam said proudly as we sat down. And Mom and Dad are helping us get a bigger place before he's born. Isn't that amazing? I forced a smile, my jaw aching from holding it in place. At one point during dinner, Liam leaned over and said quietly, You know, we really appreciate your contribution. It means a lot. My contribution? I asked, my voice like ice. Yeah, he said, smirking slightly. Mom told me you're helping out financially. It's really generous of you. The table went quiet. My mom gave me a warning look, like she could sense the storm about to break. I put my fork down carefully, my hands steady even though my chest was burning. I didn't contribute, I said flatly. My money was taken without my permission. Don't be dramatic, my dad said, waving his hand. We're a family. This is what families do. No, I said, standing up. This is what you do? Take from me to give to him, over and over again. You've made it very clear who matters and who doesn't. Ethan, my mom started, but I was already grabbing my coat. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car, clothes, books, the handful of photos I had left that didn't make me angry to look at. And as I shut the trunk, I made myself a promise under the yellow glow of the streetlight. I would build a life so far above theirs they wouldn't even be able to reach it. And one day, when they finally came knocking, I'd be the one deciding whether to open the door. Leaving that night felt both liberating and terrifying. My car was packed with everything I owned, which wasn't much. 2 duffel bags of clothes, a box of books, a secondhand laptop that barely worked, and a few framed photos I wasn't ready to throw away yet. I didn't even know where I was going as I drove out of my parents' neighborhood. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't coming back. For the first few weeks, I slept on a friend's couch. He was another student I'd met at the diner, someone who knew what it meant to scrape by. His apartment was small, drafty, and always smelled faintly of mildew. But he didn't ask questions when I showed up at 2 o'clock in the morning with bags in my trunk. I told him I'd only stay a few days. It turned into 2 months. Those were the hardest weeks of my life. I was working 3 jobs by then. The diner, a graveyard shift at a gas station, and temp work unloading trucks at a warehouse when they needed extra hands. My body ached constantly, my grades slipped, And there were nights I went to bed hungry because I had to stretch every dollar. Instant noodles became my diet, and on really bad days, I'd water down soup just to make it last longer. I remember one night in particular, I came home from the warehouse after a 14-hour shift. My back hurt so much I could barely stand upright, and my hands were raw from hauling boxes. I opened my bank app and saw I had just $11.42 left. Rent was due in 3 days. My heart sank so low I thought I might never feel it rise again. That was rock bottom. But even in that moment, sitting on a second-hand mattress in the corner of my friend's living room, staring at my cracked phone screen, a thought sparked in me. If my parents had taught me anything, it was this. I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. Not for money, not for security, not even for love or approval. I started writing out plans late at night, scribbling ideas into a battered notebook. I researched scholarships more aggressively, applied to internships I knew I was underqualified for, and started teaching myself skills online when I should have been sleeping. Coding tutorials, finance basics, entrepreneurship blogs, anything that hinted at a way out, I devoured. Still, the bitterness never left. Every time I heard from my parents, it was just another reminder of how deep their favoritism ran. They'd send me group texts about Liam's milestones. Look at their new house. Baby shower was a success. Liam just got promoted again. My name was never mentioned unless it was in the context of comparison. How I should be more like him, how he was making smart choices, how I could learn something. One call in particular nearly broke me. I hadn't spoken to them in months when my dad rang. His voice cheerful. Hey Ethan, you'll never guess. Liam just bought a new SUV. Top of the line, leather seats, all the bells and whistles. He deserves it after working so hard. You should come by and see it. I almost laughed. At that moment, I had 2 crumpled singles in my wallet and an empty fridge. Instead, I said, I'm busy, Dad, and hung up. That night, I wrote a single line in my notebook. Never depend on their approval. Build your own. The anger became fuel. Every late shift, every night, I stayed up teaching myself how to do something new. Every dollar I tucked away, it all added up to a fire that wouldn't go out. I didn't tell anyone about my plans. I just worked quietly, methodically, pushing myself forward one exhausted step at a time. There were setbacks. I failed a class one semester because I fell asleep during too many lectures. I lost a job at the warehouse when I couldn't make it to a shift after pulling an all-nighter at the diner. I got sick once and had to choose between paying for antibiotics or paying for utilities. But every failure was a scar that reminded me why I couldn't give up. Because deep down, I knew if I ever stopped moving, if I ever gave in, I'd prove them right. I'd be the disappointment, the afterthought, the one who never lived up to Liam. And I refused to give them that satisfaction. So I kept grinding, kept learning, kept planning. And even though I was living on fumes, even though the nights were long and lonely, I felt something begin to shift inside me. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet resolve, a voice that whispered, this won't be your life forever. You will rise. And when you do, they'll regret every single time they chose him over you. The change didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like one day I woke up and everything was fixed. It was gradual, almost invisible at first, but looking back, I can trace the exact moment when the climb began. It was during my junior year when I landed an internship with a small tech startup. I'd applied on a whim at 3 o'clock in the morning, half asleep after a night shift, and didn't think I had a chance. But the founder, a guy named Mark, called me personally. You work 3 jobs and still go to school full-time? He said, almost laughing. If you can handle that, you can handle anything we throw at you. That internship changed everything. It was unpaid at first, which meant even more nights eating cheap noodles and walking to save bus fare. But it gave me access to something I hadn't had before, mentorship. Mark taught me how startups worked, how funding rounds happened, how products were built, how to think like someone who wasn't just trying to survive, but trying to build something. I threw myself into the work, stayed late, took on projects that weren't even assigned to me, and asked endless questions. Slowly, I stopped feeling like an exhausted kid stumbling through life and started feeling like someone who could make things happen. By senior year, the startup offered me a paid position. It wasn't much, barely more than what I made at the diner, but it was enough that I could finally quit one of my 3 jobs and focus. My grades shot up. My nights were still long, but now they were filled with coding and brainstorming instead of just exhaustion. I'll never forget the first time I saw more than $1,000 sitting in my bank account. I just stared at the number, afraid it might disappear. It was small, sure, but it was proof that I was moving forward. When I graduated, I didn't invite my family. I told them I was too busy, which wasn't exactly a lie. I had already accepted a full-time role at the startup and moved into a tiny but private apartment. No more couches, no more shared fridges, no more hearing about Liam's perfect life at every family dinner. From there, things started to snowball. The startup took off. We landed funding, doubled our team, and I was suddenly in meetings with investors, giving input on decisions that mattered. My salary jumped. I started paying off my student loans aggressively, watching the balance drop each month like it was a game I was determined to win. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I began taking better care of myself, too. Cooked real meals. Started running in the mornings just to clear my head. Bought clothes that actually fit instead of whatever was cheapest at the thrift store. People started noticing. "You look different," one of my old coworkers said when I visited the diner one afternoon. "Like, lighter, happier." I was. I started networking, attending conferences, meeting people who had built companies from scratch. Every time I shook someone's hand or traded ideas over coffee, I felt myself stepping further and further away from the scared kid who once cried over an $11 bank balance. By the time I was 26, I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a partner. When the company was acquired, my shares turned into a payout that made me sit down on the floor and laugh until I cried. It wasn't generational wealth yet, but it was enough to do things I'd only dreamed about. Invest, travel, choose where I wanted to live without looking at the cheapest option first. I bought the penthouse a few months later. The first night I slept there, I didn't put any furniture in the bedroom. I just lay on the floor, staring up at the massive windows and the city spread out like a sea of lights. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was mine. The calls from my parents became more frequent after that. Little check-ins asking how I was doing, dropping hints that I should visit. At first, I ignored them. Then, I started answering with polite, short responses. I kept the conversation surface level, never mentioning how well I was doing, never giving them an inch more of me than I wanted to. But I could tell they were curious. They wanted to know more. And a part of me, the part that still remembered sitting in the dark of that parking lot years ago, wanted them to see what they had thrown away. I didn't go looking for a confrontation right away. In fact, for a while, I kept my success deliberately quiet. I liked the idea that my parents still thought of me as the struggling younger son off somewhere figuring things out while I was sitting in my high-rise apartment closing deals and watching my net worth tick upward. But silence only lasts so long. One Sunday morning, as I was sipping coffee by the window, my phone buzzed with a group message from Mom. It was a picture of Liam and Jessica standing in front of a freshly renovated house, apparently their dream home. The caption read, "Look how far we've come as a family." Something about the wording made my jaw tighten. As a family, as if I'd been part of any of it. Later that week, I got a call from Liam himself. "Hey, little bro," he said cheerfully. "We're doing a housewarming next month. Mom and Dad said you should be there. You know, make it a family thing. Plus, you can finally meet the kids." There was a pause, like he was waiting for me to thank him for the invitation. I smiled even though he couldn't see me. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and stared out at the skyline. For the first time in years, I wanted them to see me. All of me. Not the exhausted college kid they remembered, not the responsible, one who quietly shouldered whatever they dumped on me. I wanted them to meet the man who had built something without them. But I didn't want to just show up. I wanted to make it unforgettable. The timing couldn't have been better. The company I'd helped build was in the middle of a new round of funding, and I had just finalized a deal that gave me a significant equity boost. My financial advisor nearly fell out of his chair when he saw the numbers. "This is generational wealth territory," he told me during one of our meetings. "You're in a position now where you can do pretty much whatever you want. Buy property, invest in other startups, even retire early if you're smart about it." That sentence stayed with me. Do whatever you want. So, I started planning. I upgraded my wardrobe-tailored suits, custom shoes, watches that quietly screamed success without looking flashy. I learned how to host proper dinners, how to talk about markets and investments with the kind of ease that made people listen. I surrounded myself with people who were as ambitious as I was, and I soaked up everything I could from them. And then, almost by accident, I learned the piece of information that sealed my plan. It came from a casual conversation with my dad. He called me one afternoon, trying to sound casual, but with that undertone of fishing for information. After a few minutes of small talk, He mentioned that Liam and Jessica had been going through a rough patch financially, despite the new house. They've been asking for help again, he said. We're doing what we can, but things are tight. You know how it is. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. Oh, I knew exactly how it was. That was the moment I decided when I saw them next. I wouldn't just tell them I was doing well. I'd show them what real independence looked like. And I'd do it in a way they would never forget. I started by inviting a few close friends over to the penthouse and walking through my plan. One of them, a lawyer who specialized in corporate contracts, helped me put some things in order. Investments, trusts, the works. Another friend who worked in interior design helped me transform the space so it looked like something out of a magazine, minimalist, sharp, modern. When I looked around afterward, I barely recognized the place. It didn't just feel like an apartment anymore. It felt like a statement. And then, 3 weeks before Liam's housewarming, I made my move. I called my parents. Hey, I said casually, it's been a while. Why don't you come visit me next weekend? Bring Liam and Jessica if you want. I'd love to host everyone here for once. There was a pause on the other end of the line, like they didn't quite know how to respond. That sounds nice, Mom said finally, her voice warm but tinged with curiosity. We'd love to see where you live. Great, I said, glancing out at the skyline. I'll have everything ready. When I hung up, I exhaled slowly. For years, they'd made me feel small. In 1 week, they were going to see just how big I'd become. The morning they were supposed to come, I woke up early and made sure everything was perfect. The place gleamed, floors polished, the kitchen counters spotless, the balcony doors wide open to show off the view. My lawyer friend had helped me frame some of my company's press features, and I had them hung tastefully in the hallway. On the coffee table sat a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket, flanked by crystal flutes. I didn't do it to brag. I did it because I wanted them to really see the life I had built without them. The life they once decided wasn't worth investing in. When the elevator doors opened and they stepped into the penthouse, I saw their faces change instantly. My mom's mouth dropped open. My dad's brows went up, and Liam let out a low whistle. This is wow, my mom said, her voice somewhere between awe and disbelief. Nice place, little bro, Liam added, glancing around. Didn't know you were doing this well. I smiled politely, taking their coats. Make yourselves at home. I led them into the living room, where the skyline stretched out like a painting behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a long moment, no one said anything. They just stood there, taking it all in. This must have cost a fortune, my dad said finally, half admiring, half skeptical. It did, I said calmly, but it was worth it. I poured everyone a glass of champagne and gestured for them to sit. Liam and Jessica settled on the couch, my parents on the armchairs. I sat across from them, relaxed, like a host with all the time in the world. So, I said lightly, how's everyone been? How's the new house? That was all it took for them to start talking about mortgage rates, renovations, daycare plans. I nodded, smiling, listening as they painted the picture of their busy, expensive lives. At one point, my mom turned to me and said, you must be so happy for your brother. See, helping him first was the right choice after all. Look how well things turned out. The words hung in the air like smoke. I set my glass down carefully. You really think it was the right choice? I said softly, taking my college fund. My dad frowned. We've been through this, Ethan. It was for the good of the family. I nodded slowly. You're right. It was. Just not in the way you think. They stared at me, confused, as I stood and walked to the window. The city stretched below us, glittering in the afternoon light. You took away my safety net, I said, my voice steady. You forced me to build everything from scratch. And because of that, I learned how to do it on my own. Every dollar in this place, every piece of furniture, every square foot, I earned it, without a cent from you. My mom shifted uncomfortably. Ethan, we didn't mean. I turned back to face them, calm but sharp. No, you didn't mean it. You meant to prioritize Liam. You meant to tell me I didn't matter as much, and you meant to think I'd forgive you just because things worked out. No one spoke. Liam glanced at Jessica, who was staring at the floor. I didn't invite you here for an apology, I continued. I invited you here so you could see what you lost when you chose him over me. I don't need you anymore. Not for money, not for approval, not for anything. I built this life myself. I crossed the room and pressed the intercom button near the door. Daniel, I said to my butler. Yes, I'd actually hired one recently, mostly for events and travel. Please show our guests out. There was a stunned silence as the words sank in. You're kicking us out? My dad asked, incredulous. No, I said quietly. I'm letting you leave. There's a difference. My mom stood slowly, her face pale. Liam looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. They all filed toward the door, glancing around the penthouse one last time. When the elevator doors closed behind them, I let out a long, quiet breath. The room was silent again, just like it had been that first night I moved in. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, but complete. The next morning, I woke up to a string of texts from my mom. The first one was defensive. We were just doing what we thought was best for everyone. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. The second one was guilt-laced. We only wanted your brother to have a good start. The last one was short and bitter. If you want to cut us out, that's your choice. I stared at the messages for a long moment before setting the phone down. There was a time when I would have felt sick with guilt, when I would have apologized just to keep the peace. But now all I felt was clarity. A few days later, Liam called. He sounded tired, strained. Look, he said, I don't agree with everything Mom and Dad did, but you didn't have to go nuclear on them. They're upset. Mom's been crying. You think I don't know what crying feels like? I said quietly. I spent years crying myself to sleep because of the choices they made. You got the house, the wedding, the start in life I was supposed to have, and they let me suffer for it. Liam was silent. You're their golden boy, Liam. You always will be. I said, my tone calm, not angry. But I don't owe them anything anymore. And I don't owe you anything, either. He muttered something under his breath about me being selfish before hanging up. That was the last time we spoke for months. The silence that followed was different this time. Not lonely, but freeing. My parents stopped sending group updates. No more pictures of Liam's kids. No more news about their house renovations. No more backhanded comparisons. It was like a door had finally closed between us. And for once, I was the one who had turned the handle. Months later, I threw my first formal dinner at the Penthouse, inviting colleagues, mentors, and friends who had stood by me through the hardest years. As we toasted under the glow of the city lights, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a decade. I didn't just survive what my parents did to me. I turned it into the fuel that built my entire life. And as I raised my glass that night, looking out over the skyline, I said the words that had been sitting on my tongue since the day they drained my college fund. To family, I said with a faint smile. Sometimes they teach you exactly who you don't want to be. The room laughed softly, glasses clinking, and for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free.